Hi there, my name's Ruth Francis. I'm Enterprise Coordinator at the East Sussex Careers Hub based at the County Council. Today we're going to talk about the digital sector here in East Sussex, and I'm joined today by Joe and Sean from Factory Internet in Hastings. Hi.
Hello.
Hiya.
Thanks so much for joining us. So first of all, I'd like to start with you, Joe, if I may. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about Factory Internet and what it does.
Yeah, sure. So here at Factory Internet, we basically, in a nutshell, we talk to businesses about their business tools, data and their systems. And we design and build then the houses for those systems, data and tools to live within. So this might be in the cloud, so you might well have heard of cloud computing. So that's either going to be within Google, Amazon Web Services or Azure, or it may well be within our own data centre, which is near Gatwick Airport. We then use a variety of technical solutions and software, and so we build, support and monitor those for our customers and for those businesses. This ensures that their systems are functioning with maximum efficiency and availability. So for example, if we was going to be managing a website, which we manage quite a few of, we will monitor that with various graphs and parameters to ensure that when users go to that website and they click on a page or they want to buy something, then they can do that pretty well.
Brilliant.
We also help customers from a security perspective as well. So you've probably heard of cyber security and cyber attacks. So once those systems are built and in their appropriate location, we basically manage where that is and make sure that intruders don't get in there and steal their data.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. So you're really just helping us manage our computing at work in a very smooth, trouble-free way. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
And what's your role, Joe, at Factory Internet?
So my role is quite varied. Predominantly, I guess I look after the relationships. So that's relationships with our customers, potential customers, partners, so they might be companies who provide software to us, which then we provide to our customers for their business solution. I also get involved in shows, albeit virtual at the moment, so organising us attending shows and also going to different expos as well and having a look around at kind of new technologies and meeting new people. So as well as that, I look at new business opportunities as well. So yeah, a few hats because we're a smaller business.
Yeah, so, indeed. Yeah. How many staff do you have there actually, roughly?
We're about 5 at the moment.
Okay. Okay, yeah, well, it's a very complex operation for such a small number of people.
Automation allows us to do.
Yes, so we'll come on to that in a minute. Thank you, Joe. So Sean, if I could turn to you now. So I understand that you have only been with Factory Internet for quite a short time. So do you want to tell me a little bit about your role and how you got into it?
Of course, yeah. So I'm a solutions engineer with Factory Internet. That means I work more on the technical side of things. So a lot of our work that will go into designing systems or working on projects with companies that will let us create their website, for example, or assess their security to make sure they're staying safe and sound. I'm kind of working between those projects on a technical side and then also relating that information in a kind of consumer-friendly way, shall we say, that's not too technical.
Sure.
I really got into computing a while ago because it was a really big hobby of mine. It's something that I'd always enjoyed playing around with on a computer. And it really started as a kind of a passion and a hobby of just tinkering around with things. As I got older, that developed into something I wanted to follow a little bit more. So I decided to teach myself how to kind of write computer code or program. And from that, it gives you a bit more of a technical ability, obviously going into creating new systems and managing things, of obviously how these things operate. There is always a lot to learn in computing and IT in general. There's always new things which are important and coming out, so it definitely keeps you on your toes.
Brilliant. And so do you have ICT, GCSE, A-level degree, or tell me what kind of qualifications you needed?
Sure. So I took a bit of a different path academically to getting to where I am today. So I didn't end up taking many technical or at least computer related roles in school, at least at GCSE and A level. I had absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. It wasn't until I'd actually studied a year of my first degree that I started in philosophy, which I realised was not the path I wanted to take. So after changing course to do a bit more of a related degree, I finished, and essentially I would say that my degree is definitely helpful for giving you an idea of how computer systems operate, but it's certainly not essential. And in terms of formal qualifications, that's really the only ICT related piece that I'd actually have. So to anyone out there who is not taking computing as an option, but you think, actually, I might still really like to do that, don't worry. It's certainly not the be all and end all. But of course, if you do have the opportunity to learn all of these things in a classroom, it's certainly going to help you on your way to getting the skills you need.
Okay, that is really interesting. I think that feels quite freeing in a way, because it feels like it's quite accessible. I mean, do you think that's quite
definitely
typical, Joe? I mean, you're involved in recruiting sometimes, aren't you? Do you think have you got a range of staff, some with ICT qualifications and others without? Or
yeah, I mean, during my time within factory and looking back on other positions I've had as well, it's a real variety and a real kind of mix of backgrounds. So I think the one thing is actually, which Sean has pointed out, so IT as a hobby. I think if you've got that interest in your spare time, you're tinkering with systems, building your own servers, maybe experimenting with Raspberry Pis, which are not edible. They are a computer system. So yeah, I think that's the one thing, is that passion, that element of it being a hobby. Yeah, so there's a variety of routes in, really.
Okay, thank you. We'll come on to that perhaps in a little bit more detail towards the end of the interview. So Sean, I'm hoping that you won't mind telling us a little bit more detail about what you do day to day. So I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, of course.
So let us jump straight away to this what looks like a giant warehouse full of boxes. I'm sure there's more to it than that, Sean. So
a little bit more to it. So this gives you an idea of what the inside of a data center looks like. Data centers are used all throughout computing, and you can really think of it as really the house of where most of the things like websites that you visit on your computer really live. A data center is usually made up of these big boxes you can see called racks, and all of these will be filled up with servers. So a server, which you may or may not have heard of, is really just like the computer that you might have in your house, like a laptop or a desktop, except its task, instead of providing you with access to the internet or writing an email, it usually does one task of, let's say, running a website. So every website you will have visited, be it something like your school's website or Google, will live in a data center on a server, somewhere like where we are seeing now.
Amazing. So, and is this the same place?
Yes, so this will give you a bit more of an idea of kind of, in particular, all of those different servers. So you can see there's many of them. Often there'll be hundreds, if not thousands, in one building. And usually you'll need quite a few different servers working together to maintain a website or maintain a few different things that you have there. And you can see lots of different cables. There's lots of work that goes into getting those neat and tidy.
I'm sure. So now we've got some very scary looking graphs. Tell us about these, Sean.
So in our day-to-day work, one of the things we do, as Joe mentioned, would be to monitor lots of things that we host. These are usually different systems, lots of them are websites, for example. So what we're seeing here is 3 different graphs. I know they do look quite spiky and scary, but this is actually all well within a normal range. So these would each be monitoring a different aspect of a computer or a server. So one of them might be, for example, something like the processor. That's really the heart of a computer, like the engine in your car would be, keeps everything going and ticking along. So we'd expect to see this go up and down, for example, on a website, if more people decide to visit that website. And essentially, all of those people are really just ramping up how hard it has to work. These might also be used for things like storage, so how much space it has on that website's hard drive, or the memory of that computer. We'd always have a range within we'd expect these to operate. So sometimes, although they do look spiky and scary, it's all normal. And we monitor these up to a certain threshold, which means if they get too high, alarm bells start ringing and we dive in and fix it before anything nasty happens.
Brilliant. And is this a similar thing happening here?
So something quite similar. So you can see here a lot of the time it's actually at a kind of nice normal low level, but we do have spikes that go up and down quite consistently. And one of the biggest things that we look at is patterns as well. We even use a few advanced technology things like AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, which really allows our computer and monitoring systems to tell us when something is out of the ordinary. So even though some of these spikes on their own might look quite scary, because we know and we expect them to happen at the same time every day, for example, we know that actually it's all under wraps and it's as expected.
Now that's reassuring.
Yes, certainly. This will give us a bit of a different idea of what we'd expect as well. So this bar chart is showing us essentially how fast a website is responding to people. So in this case, we actually want it to be lower to be better. So these spikes are often where if you go onto a website and you click something like the next page, for example, and it takes ages to load, that's probably what we're seeing in these big spikes here. So what we really want would be as low as possible and as flat as possible, because it means the website is working nice and quickly. When somebody clicks on something, it should bring them to the next page like that, and we shouldn't have too much kind of lag or downtime.
Sure, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yes, we've all had those frustrating experiences.
We all have.
We're desperate to buy some really exciting thing. Suddenly it all stops.
Always. And this will give us a bit more of a specific look of some of these aspects in a server. So we have titles for these different graphs in this one. On the top, we have what we call our CPU usage. CPU stands for the central processing unit. As I mentioned earlier, a processor is often what we'd call it. And this is really like the engine in a car, the heart of a computer. So we'd expect this to be nice and flat, no sudden spikes, just ticking over smoothly and nicely. The next one down is RAM, or random access memory. So this is often what we will use to kind of load things up quickly. If you don't have enough RAM, that again might contribute towards you clicking on something and not getting that instant next page that you'd expect. And the all-important things on the bottom are monitoring what we'd call uptime. This is really how long something's been running for. And again, we don't want to see any drop-offs here, because that means either the website has broken, a server is broken, something along the way has gone nastily wrong, and it's not what we'd like to see. So uptime should be as flat and consistent as possible. Fab. And moving on to these ones, on the bottom line here, the ones that aren't flat, these are a bit more interesting, and this is our network usage. So when we're dealing with things on the internet, of course, a network is what connects everything. It's what allows us to connect our computers in front of us to servers in data centers that might be hundreds or even thousands of miles away. So it's important to monitor this network traffic, as we'd call it, and that's how many people are going to a website and trying to access things on it, and how much of the website is trying to send things back to that person as well. So again, even though we have spikes, this is probably just corresponding to how many people are trying to run and access something all at once.
Super.
So this gives us a bit of an idea of what a server looks like on the inside. You may or may not have seen the inside of a computer before, but they'd actually be quite similar if you looked at them together. So they'll contain the different components that we said, things like the processor, the memory, and a hard drive to store some things on. You'll also have a power supply in there, just like your normal plug that you'd have for your laptop, and a disk drive on this one to access it. And in those big racks we saw in the data center, you'll have a really large number of these. And they're actually very thin and small, so you can actually simply slide one of these in and slide one of these out of the server rack in case you needed to change it, or quickly open it up and fix it.
Amazing, thank you. So this is one of the racks you were talking about.
Exactly, so we have a few of those in there together.
Yeah. And that looks like the back of the rack, am I right?
That's exactly right. So you can see there how many plugs you have going in and out of it. If you ever have a chance to look behind your television at home or look behind your desktop PC, you'll probably see loads of different wires coming out of it. And in this case, when we're working with tens, if not hundreds in this picture of different server racks, the amount of cables that you have goes up as well. So it's important to keep those nice and neat and tidy.
Yeah, that looks like it could turn into a spider's nest.
Yeah, very easily.
Okay, we've got another set of racks, if I'm using the right term now, Sean.
You are indeed. So this would give us an idea of a few different kinds of things that you'd see within a rack. So some of these might be normal servers, like we saw a few pictures ago, which will essentially be like a computer, which would go towards running a website, making sure it stays online, making sure you don't have a slow time accessing anything. But lots of these will also be storage or hard drives. So it's important to have lots of free space, because often when you go to a website, every picture or every image or every file that you see has to be stored somewhere. And of course, we need quite a lot of storage to do that on really big scale websites. So often you have some of these which are just for running a website and just for keeping its contents on another system. And you've also got a little screen there which you could use if you were having to come to a data center to fix something or just check everything was okay.
That is so interesting. I think people sort of feel like websites are almost kind of floating there in the air, but it really shows you the physical space and the equipment that's needed to be behind them.
Of course, and this is the reality of what the cloud looks like. Although it seems nice and light and airy and fairy in the sky, it's actually, as a matter of fact, as you said, all in these kind of warehouse buildings somewhere, which generate a massive amount of heat and have to be kept very cool. The hotter a computer gets, often the slower it runs, so these need to be kept as chilly as possible. So if you're ever really hot in the summer, it's a nice place to be.
Yes. Okay, what do we have here?
So this would be another side of what we do day to day, which instead of monitoring in a bit more of a visual format with our graphs, this is using what's called a command line interface on a terminal on a computer. So every time you go to interact with a computer or an iPad or your phone, obviously you have icons which you can press, and those take you to the place you want to be, like your camera or your pictures, for example. This is a bit of a different way of interacting with a computer or a server. Instead of having icons that we click on, this is essentially using commands which are really given words which have a meaning the computer can understand. And when you give an input, a command, the computer will know what to do with it, but it does take a long time to learn those things. So
that's basically when someone talks about learning coding, that's what they mean. They mean learning that language.
Of course, and there are many different coding languages. In this case, we're simply interacting with a computer just to do basic things it knows. We're not writing anything new. So this is actually kind of one step down from actual programming, as it were. But this still relies on a good amount of computer knowledge that you'd have to have. We'd use a system like this to interact with our servers, once again, to check them. It's not quite as pretty as a lot of the graphs are, but this gives us more control to make changes if we needed to do something like turn it off or on, if we needed to do something like move storage drives around to make sure it has enough free space and nothing gets too full and slow and sluggish. But it's a bit more of a strange way of interacting with your computer than you know. Yeah,
it would take a while to get used to, I guess, but
it certainly does.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
So I will stop sharing screen now and return to you lovely people. So yeah, that was really interesting, Sean. Thank you very much. I certainly learned a thing or two. So yeah, and it's really interesting, the idea, like we were saying, of the physical space of the servers and the data centers and kind of where they are as well. So you were saying that you've got one in Gatwick area. Would you expect to see lots of others all around East Sussex, Joe, for instance?
Yeah, there's multiple companies about really that have data centers. I mean, there's there's the kind of core big few which are around London Docklands area, and there's a few kind of smaller Sussex providers, and there's also an interesting one I've come across. I'm not sure whether they're about still, but they were called the Bunker, and I think that was pretty much, there was like underground data centers. So yeah, and it can come in quite a variety of guises, and also shipping containers. I think a lot of people hold servers within as well. Yeah, I mean they've just got to be incredibly secure and kept incredibly cold, and obviously have the ability to have a lot of power fed into them as well.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. I think that's given everyone much more sort of physical idea of kind of exactly what a digital company is doing, and it's really great to know that that's happening here in East Sussex in Hastings. So yeah, thank you, Sean, for that insight. So Joe, I'm just returning to here we are in July 2020. Obviously the pandemic has meant that all of us are working at home and studying at home, and I'm sort of getting the impression that surely with all that happening, maybe the opportunities in digital sector for people looking for jobs would be a good place to look. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, especially for us. I mean, we're very fortunate that we've been incredibly busy this year. So with the pandemic, obviously a lot of businesses have had to move their office locations, so everyone's located at home. So that means that they will be needing to connect to their email and all their business apps still. So Office 365 is something that a lot of companies have been deploying during the pandemic to allow for all communications to resume as normal, so people can contact each other and they can phone each other, have video conversations, and basically do exactly what they was doing in the office, albeit remotely. So yeah, and obviously with cloud computing, I mean, 10 years ago, it would have been a really different circumstance for a lot of businesses. Now with cloud computing, because everybody has their business applications and their tools within the cloud. So that means that they can actually access those systems from anywhere. They don't necessarily need to be in their office. So there's never a great time to have a pandemic, but I think the cloud has made it a little bit more bearable for a lot of businesses. And yes, as a result, we have been pretty busy over the last few months, as has a lot of technology companies out there. Yeah.
Okay, that is good. That is good to know. So Sean, you've given us that lovely insight into servers and data monitoring and all those different aspects. So if anyone's thinking to themselves, you know, how can I get into this industry? How do I go about getting the skills that are needed? I mean, what would you advise them?
Of course. I would say probably the best way to do it is just to try and get started some way. I think it can be very scary to take a look at all the different things you have to learn, but if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it's that you never stop learning. You have to start somewhere, but it never seems to stop. And there's plenty of easy ways to get into it from a more technical perspective. And one of those is learning computer coding or computer programming, which again can seem like a very, very big task to take on, but it's actually made super easy nowadays. I'm going to try a bit of a Blue Peter with a here's one I made earlier. But one of the easiest ways of doing it is actually just through an app on something like, oh, I'm going to disappear with my background there. Just through an app on something like your iPad or your laptop. There's one that I have here called Swift Playgrounds, which is available on Apple iPads. And there's plenty of other websites that are available to use absolutely for free, which teach you programming in a really fun way. It could be through doing something like designing your own video game. It could be doing something like designing your own website, and it gives you a really fun way of completing tasks and learning the problem solving that I think is perhaps the most important skill you can have. We look at everything like a puzzle. It's just a case of finding the right way to fit the pieces together to solve that puzzle. And that way of thinking is something that's really, really important to start, and just make sure that you enjoy doing it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. That's been really amazing. I'm just going to conclude with just a few little signposting to different resources that might help you. So obviously, yeah, Sean has mentioned Swift Playground. There's Raspberry Pi. Is that better for younger kids, Sean?
So Raspberry Pi is basically, you can think of it like a mini computer.
Yeah.
It's a great way to get started on the hardware, the physical side of computing. They're kits that you can pick up and you can upgrade them as much as you need as you go. It's a really fun way to get tinkering and playing around with things. And it's a little bit safer than taking your parents' computer apart than telling them you're very sorry you can't put it back together. I wouldn't recommend that. Raspberry Pi
almost sounds like that might have happened to you, Sean.
Learned the hard way.
Yeah. Thank you. So if you'd like to know more about digital careers, go to the National Careers website, and if you look under the job categories for computing, technology and digital, in terms of jobs here in Sussex, you can look on the Wired Sussex website for digital jobs. Another good place to look is to consider apprenticeships with digital companies. So you can go onto the UK government website and look on the Find an Apprenticeship service, and also obviously just keep a lookout for local digital employers like Factory Internet. Visit their websites just to see what vacancies are coming up. Thank you very much indeed, Joe and Sean. You were awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.